So we created two candidates with two identical populist messages. One would be a Democrat, one would be an independent. Same exact message. 8% penalty for being a Democrat in these states. And people keep asking, well, if this populism, progressive populism and worker-oriented stuff was so important, why didn't Sherrod Brown win in Ohio? Well, he doesn't win because he's carrying the Democratic brand on his shoulder. He goes into the election down 8%.
Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup.
This is Ashley with Status Coup.
On the ground.
In Philadelphia.
Flint, Michigan. East Palestine, Ohio. Please support the leading independent news outlet on the ground.
Covering what the corporate media covers up. Hey, it's Ashley Bishop with Status Coup. I am really excited to be joined once again by Les Leopold, a longtime labor activist, co-founder of the Labor Institute and author of many books, including Wall Street's War on Workers, How Mass Layoffs and Greed Are Destroying the Working Class and What to Do About It. So thank you again for being here, Les. The last time that we spoke was back in April. So right around the times that tariffs took effect. It is extremely hard to remember all the way back that far, but part of the justification, the public justification for these tariffs was onshoring jobs, bringing manufacturing back here, protecting workers in the US. We are now several months in, and two stories in the Wall Street Journal, both published on August 11th, seem to indicate how that's been going. So I'm just going to read a little bit. U.S. companies have announced $983.6 billion worth of stock buybacks so far this year, the best start to a year on record. According to data going back to 1982, they are projected to purchase more than $1.1 trillion worth overall in 2025, which would mark an all-time high. The biggest repurchasers include tech giants Apple and Google parent Alphabet. Big banks such as JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Morgan Stanley also are leading the charge. Meanwhile, again, also published on August 11th, the era of big wages for low-paid workers is over, again, says the Wall Street Journal. Wage growth for top earners once again outstrips gains for those at the bottom. Something remarkable happened in the years immediately preceding and especially following the pandemic. Wages for poor workers began rising much faster than they did for the rich. That era may have now at least come to a temporary halt. And with worries about the health of the job market heightened following the disappointing July jobs report, it may have ended altogether. Wage growth for low-income workers looks to have significantly deteriorated in recent months, while wage growth for their higher-income counterparts has held up much better. It is a shift that could matter just for not just for low-paid workers, but the overall economy. So before we get into stock buybacks, as I suspect you'll have a lot to say on that, how do you think that workers are faring under Trump 2.0?
The same as they were faring under Biden and every other president for the last 40 years. They're going to get screwed. They're getting screwed. They don't have any protection from the most pressing problem that they face always, which are mass layoffs. That's the secret problem that neither political party wants to address. We can talk all we want about increasing jobs and bringing jobs back home, but if you don't deal with the loss of jobs due to mass layoffs, many of them triggered by stock buybacks, which we'll discuss in a minute, then the perilousness of being a working person in America in this century is completely ignored. And addressing that problem is something that's beyond the capacity of either political party right now.
And when we spoke in April, we were talking about this around the time that there was the mass layoffs in the federal sector. So there was a lot of attention on those job losses. And you made the point that, yes, obviously this is extremely important. A lot of people are losing their jobs. However, in the private sector, this happens routinely. Can you talk a little bit more about that and provide any updates on that from the last, however many months?
Well, it's probably about 1 million jobs or 1.8 million a month that are lost due to mass layoffs. It's a constant churning. When a corporation is trying to fine-tune its operations to maximize its profits. It's looking to cut costs wherever it can. So there's a constant effort to reduce the labor footprint. And unless there's a trade union there that has a contract that's a labor union that has a contract with sufficient teeth in it, it's impossible to stop these mass layoffs. Where stock buybacks come in is part of the reason of this constant fine-tuning that's going on in the corporation is they're trying to move money from their books into the pockets of their largest shareholders and into their top executives. The best non-taxable way to do that is through stock buybacks, which is going into the marketplace and repurchasing the company's own shares with the company's own money. That immediately increases the price of the shares because it reduces the number of shares that are in circulation. So every share, whatever it was worth before in terms of earnings per share automatically and artificially goes up. Now, we just did a survey, which I'm going to talk about more as we go along, of 3,000 voters in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio. And only 40% of them even know what a stock buyback is. We did a sort of multiple choice question where it became pretty, where three of the answers were not stock buybacks and one of them was. Only 40% came close to the right answer. Wow. And so this is something that people just don't know about. And even if they did, there's no will within either political party, certainly to stop this basically rape and pillage of a balance sheet of a company. But there's two sides to this problem. One problem is it's moving money to the richest of the rich, and that's going to increase inequality, which creates all kinds of stresses and strains in society. And it leaves less money for environmental controls, health and safety, and worker wages. That's one part of the problem. The other part of the problem, however, is that the best way to finance a stock buyback is not by producing a better product. It's just by reducing the number of people on your payroll. So stock buybacks and mass layoffs go hand in hand. And that is what's devastating to working people. And finding solutions to that problem, I think, has to happen outside of dealing with stock buybacks. I think there's very little will to deal with stock buybacks. But as we go along, I can tell you, I've come up with a proposal to deal with this, and we've tested it in that survey, and the results are remarkable.
I would love to hear more about that. I want to hear what do you think a proposal should look like to deal with all of this?
Okay. So let me give you the backstory. So when I wrote my latest book, Wall Street's War on Workers, I was looking at a mass layoff at Siemens Electronics Company, a massive global corporation. One of its sidekicks, things that it's spun off that still controls, was Siemens Energy. Has 80,000 workers there, 400,000 overall. And they were in the fracking business and making some sort of compressor, and they decided they wanted to get out. And they're going to lay off 7,000 people across the globe. German-based corporation. So in the United States, there were 1,700 workers, mostly actually in trade unions. They all got laid off. They got severance based on how long they were there, but not much. But all those 1,700 workers lost their jobs, and 5 or 6 plants went down. In Germany, 3,000 workers were going to lose their jobs. But in Germany, the union has half the seats on the board of directors. It's called co-determination, something the United States insisted that Germany do after World War II to keep these companies from going fascist again. So we helped push this idea. So using their power on the board of directors, they couldn't stop the mass layoffs, but they investigated them for a long time, brought in experts, et cetera. And finally, management just said, okay, we're not going to do any compulsory layoffs. We're only going to do voluntary layoffs based on buyout packages. So no one would be forced to leave. So in the United States, 1,700 workers lost their jobs and were forced to leave. In Germany, 3,000 workers were supposed to lose their jobs, and none of them were forced to leave. In addition, there were 5 facilities making this compressor that were going to be shut down all over Germany. They agreed to put a new product in those 5 facilities to keep them open.
Wow.
I said, wow, well, how do we get the leverage to do that? Well, it dawned on me that in the United States, there's something like, I don't know, $800 billion in federal contracts every year that are put out. How about adding one clause to the federal contract that says, during the life of this contract, and maybe 6 months before and 6 months after, there can be no involuntary layoffs. If you want to lay off workers, it has to be voluntary through buyout packages, the kind of which you use for executives. Happens all the time. We're trying to get rid of some executives. Here's the buyout package. If you take it, great. If you don't, we'll still have a job for you. Well, that's a lot of leverage, because what you're saying to these companies is, look, you don't have to take this money. If you want to continue to lay off workers whenever you want to, don't take the federal money. But why should taxpayers fund the layoffs of taxpayers? If you're going to take taxpayer money, don't do involuntary layoffs of taxpayers. So here's where it gets interesting. Nobody in the United States has offered this proposal. Brand new, never been heard of. I don't think you've heard of it. There's been no bill, no campaign around it, no ballot initiatives. So in this survey, which cost a pretty penny, and we did in cooperation with the Center for Working Class Politics and Rutgers University, 3,000 voters, we put to them, would you support this bill? And about something like 47% said they would. Only like 15% said they wouldn't. Then what we did was we created 2 corporate objections. So we split we had enough respondents so we could carve it up. So one group got one corporate response, the other group got another corporate response. One was about, oh, this is socialism. The other was about unintended consequences cause more layoffs. And the support went down appreciably. Then with another group, we had a rejoinder from, as if this were a campaign or a ballot initiative. So now it's, would you support this is all now a ballot initiative. The companies that get taxpayer money can't do involuntary layoffs of taxpayers. And the rejoinder was, this isn't compulsory to you. Don't take the money. But if you take taxpayer money, you can't, et cetera. And the support went way back up again. And this is a proposal that no one has ever heard of before. Now, we took this one step further. And this is where it gets really crazy. We created a new entity called the Independent Workers Political Association. Doesn't exist. And it was, we said, would you support an independent political workers association that would support independent candidates that ran on these 4 issues, just 4 issues. One of them was a guaranteed job at a livable wage if the private sector can't provide it, the public sector will. Pretty radical proposal. The other was the anti-mass layoff proposal that we were just talking about. That was the second thing. The third was stopping drug company price gouging. And the fourth was, something like that as well, pretty innocuous. So here's this new entity, right, in these 4 states. Would you support it, or would you oppose it? Not sure, et cetera. With these 4 planks, and one of them is the mass layoff proposal. 58% of the voters of those 4 states supported this new worker entity. 58%. Wow. And they never heard of it. And a key one of the key proposals was this mass layoff proposal, which they never heard of before.
Right.
So it has legs. The problem is there are no politicians that support it. Bernie Sanders came up with something a little like this around support for. In 1996, there was money going to the defense contractors to do mergers, which were going to lead to layoffs. So he said, hey, you shouldn't be taking federal money to do layoffs in these Defense Department mergers. But I tried to sit down with him and run through this again. And it just blew right by him. It wasn't computing. He wasn't. I wrote a Substack piece that gave him kind of credit for this, but it just wasn't. He's got too many other things on his mind. He just didn't have the bandwidth to take it in. But it would be enormously popular in these key swing states.
Mm-hmm.
One other finding that I want to share with you. By the way, I'm going to be starting to write about this. Our report comes out around Labor Day. We're going to have a big Zoom call at the end, probably end of September, early October, featuring Sean Fain, the president of the UAW, where we're going to go through, he's going to talk, and then we're going to go through the results of this report. Here's another thing we tested. We tried to see how's the Democratic Party label doing in these, and this is all relevant to trying to do something about stock buybacks, corporate power, finance, et cetera. Where's the political entity? You were saying, well, was the Trump administration viewed this way? No, but some of his people like Josh Hawley and J.D. Vance are more into this than the Democrats are. But here's what we were testing: what does the Democratic brand do to support for various candidates? So we created two candidates with two identical populist messages, and we shifted the messages. So we created multiple candidates. One would be a Democrat, one would be an independent. Mm-hmm. Same exact message, a variety of same exact messages. 8% penalty for being a Democrat in these states. And almost all the elections in those states, in any of the contested areas overall, is much less than 8%. So, people keep asking, well, if this populism, progressive populism and worker-oriented stuff was so important, why didn't Sherrod Brown win in Ohio? He doesn't win because he's carrying the Democratic brand on his shoulder. He goes into the election down 8%. That's what it means. He goes in, and he himself admitted this. He said, everywhere I go, they're still throwing Democrat support for NAFTA in my face. He could sense that he was paying the dues. And Bernie Sanders understood this decades ago, and he's run as an independent, right? I'm not beholden to the Democratic Party. I can say what I want about them. And, that's where we are right now. And in order to do anything about stock buybacks, you need a political entity that is willing to first raise the issue so that the public could know about it and learn about it, and then take on the corporate response. So this fictitious entity we created, and we created this fictitious ballot initiative. By the way, Michigan, of those 4 states, the only one that you can do a ballot initiative, but it would have legs. So we're trying to talk to Sean Fain about, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you set up an independent workers political association and see whether people come running? Our polls suggest in Michigan, they will come running. Oh, the other thing we found is the last thing. We found that a candidate, if they were an independent, the strongest platform they could have would be support for this no compulsory layoffs as both a message and a policy. That would be the strongest combination of issues that they could run on. All the other combinations, the various Kamala Harris stuff, Joe Biden stuff, weak. And the largest group of independents reside in Michigan. So it could have legs. Anyway, that's what I've been working on.
That is a lot. You've been working on a lot. That is fascinating. And I'm particularly interested first in the finding that just being a Democrat means that you are entering into, any kind of any kind of political race at an 8% disadvantage just by being a Democrat is interesting. I mean, I have my own thoughts on this. I guess I would wonder what your thoughts are on that. Why do you think that is?
Of course, right. So fortunately, the people at the Center for Working Class Politics are gifted academics. So they anticipated your question and they tested it. So one thing we did was we had an open-ended question. We asked people what do you think about the Democratic Party? In one sentence, 70% of the comments were negative.
That is a lot.
Yes.
That is a lot. Do you remember?
Then we tried to figure out, well, is it wokeness or other stuff? Well, it turns out the woke answers were a very, very small percentage. That the major stuff was the Democratic respondents, Democratic people who identified as Democrats who responded, thought that the Democratic Party just doesn't follow through, that it doesn't have, it's basically incompetent. And the independents and the Republicans were basically saying, they're out of touch with working with the average person. They're in it for themselves. But generally, and we asked about, check whether it was what kind of values they thought the Democratic Party had and didn't have. And it just never came out as wokeness. Had nothing to do with woke. Then we did one more test. This one I'm very proud of.
Very thorough.
So it was basically the inability to follow through on its progressive populism. It just doesn't deliver. Okay, so the next thing I was interested in my book, we looked at one survey question from these very large continuous worker survey polls called ANES, CES, and another one, where like 500,000 people respond. They had a question. They track voters over a long period of time. They had a question in 2010 that they ran till 2020, and it went something like this: do you support the legalization of illegal immigrants who have been here 3 years, at least 3 years, paid their taxes, and have not committed a felony? In 2010, about 35% of working class people supported that position. It jumped to like 63% by 2020. So I wanted to test the exact same question again in these 4 states with all the voters, exactly the same question, because this is another sign, part of the cultural wokeness, immigration. And Trump's been banging on the immigration problem for the last 4 years. So I thought, okay, this has got to have changed. Guess what? Didn't change at all. Still 65%. So I asked myself, why isn't the Democratic, during all this immigration turmoil, why aren't the Democratic Party vociferously arguing for a path to citizenship when 65% of the country of the key states anyway are going to support this? What do they have to lose? Anyway, I think when you read the report, I'll make sure that you get one. You'll see, and it's just filled with, when these academics get their hands on it. We have a meeting at 4:00 today just to talk about how to refine it a little bit more, because it's kind of a heavy lift. They went bent over backwards to try to figure out what is this 8% penalty, and which issue. This is the other really interesting thing. We tested 20 different, 25 different policy positions. Some of them sort of populist light, a la Kamala Harris. Some of them more radical, like the no layoff policy. And the way we tested it, it's called max differential. The respondent gets 4 issues. They pick the one they like the most, the one they like the least, and they get another 4, most, least, and they keep going through a bunch of different proposals. Each person doesn't do all 25. I think they end up doing 10 or 11 different sets. But by doing that, you get away from people just doing a 1 to 5 thing where they can just sit, say everything is good. Right? This way, you're forcing best, worst, best, worst, best, worst. Well, it turns out that the 5th highest was the no layoff proposal, no compulsory layoff proposal. Think about that for a second. Never heard of it before.
Right.
So that tells me that I wasn't that far off in Wall Street's War of Workers. That destruction that's been caused by 40 years of neoliberalism and stock buybacks and plant closures and private equity buyouts, mergers, etc., has taken its toll, and that that people are hungry for a response that would help, and hungry for a political vehicle that will fight for them. And I hate to tell my Democratic friends and colleagues that it's not going to be the Democratic Party. In this backs up something that I constantly, was amazed at. When in 2016, Chuck Schumer said the following very famous quote: "For every one blue-collar worker we lose in Pittsburgh or Western Pennsylvania, we pick up two Republicans in the suburbs of Philadelphia." And you can repeat that for Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin. So he's admitting that the party is pulling away from blue-collar workers. And our survey shows that the blue-collar workers know it, that they're fully aware of it. But they're not, most of them are not, by the way, more than a third of the people who voted for Trump, I mean, this survey's got every angle you can imagine, more than a third support this new worker entity.
Wow.
And something like, 38% support the no layoff proposal. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. That so it's not like that Trump is the savior. It's just that Trump, was maybe better than a party that's abandoned them. It's always hard if you view the Democratic Party for years and years as your savior, or as at least being on your side, and then watching your jobs disappear and the Democrats doing nothing about it, you feel betrayed. One last example from my book that I think is the one that tells it all for me. I was looking for the county in the country that lost the most coal jobs, because I wanted to see what happened to the vote in those counties. And I was looking from 1996 till 2020. All right. It turns out to be Mingo County, West Virginia. 25,000 people lost 3,000 of their 3,300 coal jobs. So in absolute number, that was the most coal jobs of any county in America.
Okay.
It's 3,000 out of 3,300 in this tiny county. So you can imagine, just add their families to that number. So, let's say 10, so it's like 10,000 out of 25,000 people directly impacted by these job losses. The merchants that, you're talking about devastation.
Right.
All right. So Mingo County also has this incredible labor history. That's the county that Mother Jones worked in. That was the county that led the coal wars of the early 1900s. It became a big bastion of the United Mine Workers, went heavily Democratic for Roosevelt, it was occupied by troops because of the coal wars. And Roosevelt kind of liberated it, and they became strong Democrats. So Bill Clinton in 1996 got 70% of the vote of Mingo County. That's when it still had 3,300 coal jobs.
Wow.
Every 4 years, as the coal jobs went down, the Democratic vote went down. Barack Obama still got 42%. Hillary Clinton, 16%. Joe Biden, 13%. Kamala Harris, 12%. Went from 70% to 12% in lockstep with the loss of jobs. So, Barack Obama, the black man, got 3 times as many votes as Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. So, you can't blame racism for this. It's not a woke problem. The problem is their entire economy got devastated, and the Democrats, who went in power, did nothing to rebuild that area. There was so much that could have been done. The infrastructure was a mess. Reclamation of land. They needed rebuilding of schools, roads, internet service. Here's what happened. This is the nail in the coffin. They left it to private industry, right? Neoliberal, democratic, we don't really care about this area. It's lost us, forget about it. You know what moved in? What became the booming industry? You can't make this up. The booming industry of Mingo County became the sale of opioids. 2 drugstores went into competition with each other. Really, you cannot make this up. They found a doctor an hour or so away willing to write prescriptions. So they became a pill mill. And they were putting out more than 1 prescription per minute in that county. They were one of the largest, these 2 drugstores became the largest opioid prescribers, as large as the largest drugstores of New York and Boston, Los Angeles. Cars were lined up from a 5-state area to get their prescriptions filled in Mingo County. This was the Democrats' industrial policy. So that's why I'm saying to my Democratic friends, you try on doing that. Good luck. 8% penalty. No policies to deal with mass layoffs. Happy talk about reindustrialization. Now what? I mean, if you talk, what's the big thing that's happening? It's going to be we're going to see whether or not Trump is implicated in the records of the pedophile. The Democrats are going to make a big deal out of that, or give long speeches in the Senate, record-length speeches, and nobody can remember what it is that anybody said. And certainly they didn't say much of anything that's going to matter to working people across the country. So we're in a mess. We're in a mess. We need a new political formation. We need it yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, that is all fascinating. All of that is fascinating. That the example of Mingo County is fascinating, and you're right. It seems very emblematic of everything that is wrong with the Democratic Party and the reasons why voters are not working people are no longer reliant on or trust the Democratic Party. I wrote about this earlier. Earlier this year, you have talked about this extensively over many years. People want material things. It's unfortunate that it takes so much testing, so many examples, running all of these studies to figure out the thing that I think Democratic voters tell people. They want material things. They want some kind of alleviation for their suffering. They want to be able to, for millennials, people want to be able to afford to start families and have children, and for Gen Z as well, who are now grown adults. Gen Z is adults. They're not kids anymore. People want all of these things. They want to be able to afford groceries. I think that there was a study that came out relatively recently, and I want to say over the last month or so, saying that the price of groceries has gone up exponentially just since 2020. I want to say it was, like 30 plus percentage points more expensive than groceries were in 2020, which was 5 years ago. That is no time. That's no time at all. People want these very, very basic things. They tell the Democrats, we want these things. And the Democrats, say, as you said, Cory Booker stands up and gives a however many hour long plus speech that did nothing. Like there was no end result of that other than raising his own profile. They talk about things like we support Kamala Harris had said, I support an increase to the minimum wage. Okay, but that doesn't really tell us anything. What exactly do you propose to get there? What is the increase that you're supporting? It doesn't say anything. It's just I think
we tested that one too.
Okay. Of course, you guys.
Turns out that the mass layoff proposal is more popular than raising the minimum wage.
Okay.
One thing I want to stress here is that in our kind of free enterprise economy, you're nothing without a job. The safety net is so porous that you're in bad shape if you don't have a job. It's now the case that all kinds of working people are worried about this stock buyback induced job insecurity. We got contacted by Google workers average pay 200 grand a year.
Mm-hmm.
And they're petrified about mass layoffs. So the first time, they thought Google was set up looked like they had a job for life. They didn't have to worry about it. It was just,
Sure.
And then tens of thousands of people are being laid off to pay for these stock buybacks. And they came to us, said, can you help us design an educational program on this? We're scared that this is spreading into our lives. So as bad as inflationary conditions are, it's even worse if you don't have a job. So focusing on not overall macroeconomic unemployment levels, et cetera, but focusing on we're going to make it hard for corporations to lay you off just to enrich themselves. And since most large corporations are sucking off the government's federal contracts, we have leverage. Don't take the money, right? Go ahead, don't take it. We'll find somebody who's willing to abide by it. And we know that companies will, because Siemens, a large global corporation, proved to us that it's perfectly capable of conducting non-compulsory layoffs. It's perfectly capable of putting new products in plants to keep them open. The flexibility of large corporations is enormous. They're not under this, mom and pop corner candy store pressure, where they have to account for every penny. No, they can do this. Their buyback packages just won't be as large. Their bonus packages just won't be as large. They're going to have to deal with the needs of working people, which is people need a modicum of job stability. Without that, very little is possible. What's holding us back, though, is we don't have institutions, large institutions like labor unions. We don't have enough of them with the capacity to build something new. So they're kind of stuck as, supplicants within the Democratic Party, protesting here and there, getting nowhere. Please change your message so that, you'll appeal more to working people. We've already proven that you can change the message all you want. You're still down 8%. So it's a very difficult period. When I first got into the mass political economy education after the crash of 2008, I was pretty optimistic. This was even before Bernie kicked in. I could feel and see that there was a real growing resentment against Wall Street, against inequality, and the possibility of doing stuff was there. And the Democrats had the golden opportunity to bring Wall Street to heel. And they didn't do it. And the left, or the progressives, fell in line with the Democrats. And during the Biden, this is the problem that I struggle with every day. I try to ask myself, how is it possible that Trump could win not once but twice, and the second time after he led a coup? How is that possible? Well, progressives and Democrats did things like say, Joe Biden is the greatest labor president since FDR. Right? Here, FDR had a fire chat every week and talk to the country and talk to working people. Joe Biden had a press conference, once a year at most. And all these sycophants basically ended up encouraging them to keep running because they had access. The left had access. Economists could talk to their economists. Labor people could talk to their labor people, and they were living in this fantasy world. They lost complete touch with what the Democratic Party base itself was saying. 75% said Joe Biden was too old to run again.
Yeah.
What kind? And people were claiming that that Trump is this great autocrat, anti-democrat. Well, how is it that the Democrats were so anti-democratic they didn't listen to their own base? They didn't hold any primaries. They anointed Kamala Harris, who was not the strongest candidate. Because Biden hung on till the end and nobody had the guts to oppose him. Very few people had the guts to oppose him. There were I could count on my hand how many writers like myself were saying, on his birthday, a year before the election, I said, Joe, happy birthday, drop out. It's like, because it was a train wreck that in slow motion you could see it coming, and yet this whole institution called the Democratic Party was so opportunistic that they didn't have the guts to do what their base wanted. So to me, that there's a reason you get this 8% penalty. It's a performance penalty. Anyway, so that's what's come out in our poll, and I think we're paying the price now. Working people will be paying the price. You know, this big bill that passed, the big beautiful bill, is going to increase inequality. It's not going to help save their jobs, and God only knows what this tariff business will mean towards domestic jobs. As far as I can tell, the tariffs are all about Trump trying to flex his muscle, use his power to intimidate countries, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe in 20 years it will lead to more jobs here. I kind of doubt it. I kind of think that unless you stop mass layoffs, example, when all this money was given to Intel to build more chip factories in the United States under the Biden infrastructure bill, I did just a little research, and while they said they were going to create 2,000 new jobs in the United States as a result of the $8 billion they were going to get, they laid off 2,000 workers in the 6 months before they made that statement. So, if you don't stop the bleeding, you can't say, we're going to do an organ transplant over here. Meanwhile, the patient's going to bleed out over here.
Right.
So something has to be done. And I'm counting on people like you in the long run to build something new. I don't know how you're going to do it. It's going to be a massive challenge. But one last point.
Yeah.
One of the problems with building new political entities is the spoiler problem, that it'll go half-cocked into a race, and then the conservative will win. The liberals will split the vote. Conservative will win. There are 136 congressional seats where the Republican has won by more than 25 points. So there are essentially 136 conservative one-party districts. We're running a new entity. The Democrats have given up. So running a new entity, no harm, no foul. You're not spoiling anything. There's no chance. The Democrats have dropped out essentially. It's because of the gerrymandering. And right now in Nebraska, this guy Dan Osborne is running as an independent, former local labor president. Came within 6 points of winning the Senate seat in 2024. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris lost the state by 20 points. So he did much, much better. He's trying again. And what we need is about, 136 of these people. Independent, create an association of independents, get working class people to run on a working class platform that really, defends and protects working people. And see if over the next, 10 years or 15 years, we can build a new progressive populist movement that has the backing of working people and can turn the country back in a pro-worker direction.
Okay. Well, you have given us a lot to think about. I guess I would ask, I know that you have to get going. You have a very important meeting to discuss more of this, and hopefully I will be able to read the proposal, because I'm very interested in learning more about this. And I think everybody watching should also be following along with this and be interested in any other updates that you provide. So I guess as a just final question for you, what would you say to other workers, regular working people that might be watching? How else, besides what you just outlined, can we move toward a future that actually centers working people and the things that we need? How do we do things like get your policy, your proposal into the hands of lawmakers and actually get going on that?
Well, I would ask working people to push your representatives to do something about compulsory layoffs. Ban compulsory layoffs when taxpayer money is used to provide contracts for corporations. I would just raise that issue with your representatives, your union representatives, if you have a union, your political representatives, just keep raising it. It seems to me that it's it's a winner up and down the line. And I'm a really small fish. I'm going to use my Substack to promote this survey and the results. I'll keep writing articles about piece after piece. There's probably 6 articles on what we talked about today. But I'm a small fish. It's going to take many, many, many small fish to knock on the doors of representatives. We'll do our best, but it's going to take everyday working people. They're good at it. They're very good at it. We raise these issues in classes that we do, workshops we do, and it's not a heavy lift. People get it right away and start thinking about how to make it happen. So we just got to involve a lot of people in the conversation, as many as possible. And shows like yours can help do it. Thank you.
We are happy to. We are always happy to do what we can. Fascinating discussion as always. Les, thank you so much for joining me. Obviously, it goes without saying, we'll have you back anytime. Happy to hear about any other surveys and studies that you guys are working on over at the Labor Institute in a partnership now with the Center for Working Class Politics, another wonderful organization that we've actually interviewed people from before over here too. So again, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for a fascinating discussion, and I will be very curious to hear more updates on all of this.
Thank you very much for having me.